Hello, it's Deborah from Attic Lane and I'm going to show you the latest kit from Simon Says Stamp. This is the April 2018 kit and it's called Kind Heart. This is the inspiration sheet. There's lots of cool ideas on the sheet, as there always are, and in the kit there's quite a lot in the kit this month. First of all, there's a pearlised envelope. I love these, and if you've seen previous videos you know these don't always survive as envelopes. Sometimes they get cannibalised into other things. There are three pre-scored and folded grey cards. These are a lovely colour, lovely grey, really like that. As you can see, I've had a flip through this kit already because I was quite impatient waiting for it to arrive. My kits have been arriving quite late recently, the past 3 months, so I was very excited to see this kit land on my doormat. This is a piece of masking tape and masking paper, and you can see there's a slit in the middle, so we'll see how we can use that one. And then there are 3 sheets of card. So these are an orange and a sort of a turquoisey and a creamy white. And then the kit, the goodies in the kit, I'll do these ones first because I can see they're going to blind you under the lights. This stamp set is called Take Heart, and there's quite a lot on this stamp set. So there's a little sentiment, there's a vase of flowers that you can colour in, there's a bird and some nice sentiments there as well. So we'll use that. There's also a die cut which says heart. So you've got, let me see if I can show you this more easily. You've got the word heart, and then you've got an outside that you can then cut out the outside of. It's an outside, you can cut outside of that. Make sense? It will. Then we have, this is a really large stamp with some great sentiments on it. It's called Everything Together, and as you can see it does what it says on the tin. There are sticker sheets. So there are epoxy stickers, so these are sort of hard resin, and there's loads of hearts on there, some very nice colours. And then there are some puffy stickers, and these come in some quite small sizes, but we'll have a play and see what we can do with those. There are 2 mini ink pads. These are hybrid pads. This one is Melon and this one is Spring Rain. And then finally there are 12 6x6 sheets of quite thick paper, not quite card, not quite paper, in various designs. At least, I always say this, but these are not double-sided, which is always a relief because I find it difficult to choose which ones I want to use, but on the reverse they're plain white. And there you go, there's an idea of the sorts of colour ranges and designs on the sheets of paper. So, on with the cards. My preparation for the first card means that I'm going to cut one of my stamps. I've done this before, don't be scared. I'm going to show you how to cut this down and then put it back together again so you can have it as 2 separate pieces or as one whole original piece as the makers intended before I came along and chopped it up. Use very, very sharp, very pointy scissors and fold the stamp back on itself because that will help you see where the design falls and where you want to cut. And just take your time with it, there's no rush, no hurry, just snip away little bits because it's worth taking your time to make sure that you can use the stamp again as a whole piece. So I'm going to show you here what happens if I put the vase and the flowers back together again. I'm going to ink this up and I'm going to stamp it so you can see I can still use it as a vase or a jug with flowers in if I want, no difference at all. But then if I remove the jug or the vase, which I've cut away, then I leave myself with a very pretty flowery stamp. And because it has different bits sticking out and it creates this sort of wobbly shape, I can use it to fill quite a large space just by twisting the stamp around. I'm using my Versacolor ink and one of the grey cards that came in the kit, and I'm using a waste piece of paper just to cover over the left hand side of my grey card which I've opened out, and I'm going to cover the front of this card with this design of flowers. I'm just showing you a little bit closer how you need to move the stamp around and angle the stamp. So now that means that I've given myself a beautiful watercolour background on my grey card base. Now I've taken the smallest rectangular stamp from the set. I'm using my Versacolour ink and I'm stamping it down, ready to cover it with white embossing powder. I'm going to heat set this. I've got my gun really quite hot, and I hope that you can see the change from powder to that more liquid, fluid, enamely finish that you get. And then I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to put it onto a white background. I'm going to glue it in place, and I'm going to give myself a white border. And then I'm going to use this black craft foam, which is about 2 to 3 millimeters thick, to raise the design up a little bit and give it a 3D effect. I like using the craft foam. It's nice and easy to cut to the size that you need, and it's lovely and simple to stick in place. And it's cheaper, I think, than using foam pads, and it's a little bit quicker and easier than peeling off all those backgrounds off the foam pads or the foam tape. When I glue that into position on the background of my grey card, I'm using my block there just to help me stamp it down evenly, and then I'm going to take one of the little hearts from the sheet and stick it in the bottom corner, and my card is finished. A nice simple card to begin with. For my second card, I'm going to ink up using the 2 colours of ink that came in the stamp set, and I'm going to cover up one of the larger flowers, and then around the outside edge I'm going to add a darker colour of orange using one of my Distress Oxide ink pads. And when I stamp that onto a white sheet of card, you can see it gives it a different, a slightly different colour mix around the outside edge. I'm doing exactly the same with the leaves, and I've stamped out a few to give myself some options. I don't know exactly how many I'm going to use at this stage. Now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut out those little designs that I've stamped up. So here they all are cut out and ready to use on my card, and I've got a white top fold, an orange top folding card, and I've taken one of the sheets of paper from the pack, and I'm going to ink a sentiment onto this using my Distress Oxide in orange. It's a sentiment that says, "Hey there, good looking." I've already cut an angle across the bottom left of my whitish card that I've taken from the paper pack, and I'm just going to spend a long time faffing around deciding where I'm going to put these cut out elements. I've decided how I want the 2 of the first flowers that you can see that I've stuck down there. So they're stuck down along with the leaves, and I've put some foam on the back of my 3rd flower, and I'm going to stick that in position, and again that gives it a little bit of a 3D effect. I want to add some of the little tiny dots that came as on the large stamp set. So I'm using my Distress Oxide, and I'm going to go around the outside of the card, outside edge of the card, adding these little dots. I just think it makes it look a bit more fun. And that's my card complete. For my 3rd card, I'm going to do something very, very quick and very, very simple. I've chosen one of the papers from the pack and I've cut it down to size so that it will fit onto a white top folding card. I've put glue on the reverse and I'm sticking it onto the front of my card, and now I'm going to take some of the puffy stickers and I'm going to put them in position. I'm using the bird. I'm not very good on birds. I don't know if that's a hummingbird or the bird with a big beak anyway. And a little heart in the centre. I'm using one of the sentiments which matches the colour of my paper. I'm going to stick that below the bird and the heart, and that is my card finished. It was that simple. Card 4 is going to be a little bit more involved. So for card 4 I'm using a grey side folding card, and I've got some of the hearts and dots from the stamp set, and they're on my acrylic blocks, and I'm using my Versamark ink to stamp them onto the grey card. Once I've covered the background, I'm going to take a blue glittery embossing powder and I'm going to cover them up, and then I'm going to heat set them, and I'll show you the effect that we get because it's absolutely gorgeous. That's when it's been heat set. It's really, really pretty. Now I have a piece of Perspex and one of the stamps, and I'm going to use a Stays On black ink, and I'm going to ink it up, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto that. I called it Perspex. I think it's, I don't know what to call it, acrylic. I've lost the word. The bit of plastic. You know what I'm saying. I'm going to push that down quite hard to make sure that I get a really good impression. And then that's ready for the next stage, which is to put it inside a little frame that I've already cut using one of the other papers in the paper pack. I'm adding glue on the back, and I find it easier to add the acrylic clear stuff to the reverse, and that's what I've done to stick it into place. I've used my craft foam again to cut down some very thin strips, and I'm going to add these to the reverse using my glue, and that way I'm going to give myself a 3D frame. And I'll just cut these down. This is so easy to do. I really like using the craft foam. I find it easier than using the little foam pads and the foam runners that you get. Now I have a selection of things, shakeable things, that I'm going to put into what is obviously a shaker card. And I've got some lovely little pink sequins in there as well. So they're already in place on my card. I've put ink. No, I haven't. I've put glue on the reverse of my frame, and I'm going to position my frame on my card, and I'm going to stick it in place. Then I'm going to check that it's down properly to make sure nothing leaks out. Give it a quick shake, shaky shake, make sure it works, and it does, and that's my card complete. For card 5, I'm going to use the die that says heart, but I'm going to use it in a different way. So I've cut this out 4 times, and I'm using my glue pen to add glue onto one of the layers, and I'm going to add layer upon layer of this heart die cut, because what will happen then is it's almost like a chipboard word, and it's nice and thick and it's got dimension. I'm putting that to one side, and this time I've cut the word heart out of the craft foam that I used in the previous card to make the foam backing for my frame. So this time I've put repositionable adhesive onto one of my blocks, and as you can see, by adding the heart word to my block backwards and turning it over, I've made myself a stamp. So the stamp says heart, but as I was working with this and I put that word art at the top of my card, I thought, oh, I could be greedy and I could have 2 stamps here. I could have the word heart, but if I cut it down, if I cut out another one from the craft foam, and if I cut it down carefully, I can have a word that says art as well. So that's what I did on this card. So I gave myself 2 words. I'm using the orange pad, ink pad from the stamp set. I keep calling it a stamp set, from the kit, and I'm inking that up to add these words onto a white top folding card, which is going to act as a background. When you want to clean your acrylic block down, it's simple. You just use a wet wipe, just drag the little stamped word off and clean your acrylic block down. I've cut down one of the yellow pieces of paper from the paper set, and I've also got a piece of white card which I've inked up around the outside edge using the green ink pad from the kit. I got it right that time, I said kit. So I'm now going to stick the yellow piece onto the green piece. The green piece is going to act as a little background, a little mat. So now I have my word, and I'm just having a look at where I want to position that, because before I stick that into place, I'm going to take one of the sentiments and I'm going to stamp it onto my card and then use white embossing powder to heat set it. And then I'm going to add my heart along with a couple of puffy hearts, and that completes my card. For cards 6 and 7, they sort of go together, because I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can use the masking paper. I've got a orange folding card, and I'm going to cut down a rectangle of the masking paper, which will just cover around the outside edge of my card. Now I've got some dies, some rectangular dies, and I'm going to use that to cut out the centre from my masking paper. I've run it through my die cut machine off camera, and now I'm removing the little post-it note pieces that I use to hold the frame in place. Now that gives me an outside edge frame, and I'm just making a note on this with my pencil so that I know I've got an outside and an inside edge, because I plan on keeping these masks and using them again in future. I have two white top folding cards, and I'm going to use the same colours and the same stamp to show you what you can achieve. So this is one of the frames, and I've put my white card on top of the frame. I found that easier, and now I've flipped it over so we're seeing the front again. I have a dry baby wipe. It's a dry baby wipe, and I'm using that to apply the ink. This is just to show you a different way of doing things. So if you don't have foam on a stick or a foam pad or whatever, you can use a dry baby wipe. And I'm going to add the colour very, very gently. That's why on the top right of my sheet, my waste paper sheet, you can see I'm knocking off the hardest of the colour, so that I give myself a soft colour to begin with. You can always add more, you can't take it away, so just take it easy with the amount of ink that you apply to begin with. With my mask still in place, I'm putting this on my stamp platform. I'm using a piece of waste paper on the right hand side of the platform just to stop you getting the glare of one of the lights in, you can see it there in the reflective surface. I've inked this up 2 or 3 times, and I'm just repeat inking to make sure that I get a good solid image. This is another acrylic block that I use quite often, and it's very useful for sticking little tiny stamps on one end, and then you can have another stamp on the other end, and you just switch and turn it around whenever you want to use it. So I'm applying dots in orange from one end and a little dot again in green from the other side, and that's my first card complete as far as the inking is concerned. And now I'm going to very gently remove this masking tape, because I want to keep this and use this again in future, because it's very useful to be able to just make a nice little white border on a card. That card came together pretty quickly, so if you needed to do something in a rush, it's a useful way to do it. Now this is how I'm putting my masking tape back together again, because it does tend to roll up. I've used a stamp block just to hold the little lower part in place, and then I just keep adding keep rolling on that the rest of the cover for my masking tape. Does that make sense? I hope it did. Now I'm using the other piece. This is the frame that I cut out before, and I've put the frame straight in the middle of my white card. This is going to be a bit difficult for you to see because it's white on white. I'm a genius, aren't I? But trust me, it's looking great. I'm inking up the stamp that I originally cut away from the vase. Do you remember when we did that painful stuff in the first card? I'm using it again to go around the outside border using Versamark ink, because I'm going to fill out the outside border, and I'm going to use white embossing powder. Just stay with me, this will work. White embossing powder all around the outside edge, and then I'm going to heat set it. I'm leaving my mask in place, that's still there, and now I'm using my dry baby wipe technique again, and I'm going to go around the outside edges, and hopefully it will reveal the white embossing powder below. Now I'm using my stamp platform again, and I'm using exactly the same stamp set that we used on the last card. I've added one of the enamel hearts to the top right of my card, and I'm taking a glitter pen that was used in one of the earlier kits from a couple of months ago, just to add a little bit of glitter to some of those words, and that's my second card using this technique finished. Give it a go. It's a different way to use the masking paper, but it's good fun. Card 8 is a little bit different. I've cut down one of the paper packs that had some nice, one of the paper sheets that had some nice little sentiments on it, and I'm gluing some craft foam onto the reverse of a mat that I've used from the turquoisey blue cardstock. I've also cut another piece of a rectangular mat from one of the other sheets in the pack. Now I have a paper clip, and I'm going to show you a way to use a paper clip, but to give it a little bit more zhuzh, I'm taking one of my set of long nose pliers, and I'm just turning one of the loose ends back on itself to make a loop. That loop isn't going to be used for anything in this card, but it just makes the paper clip a little bit more decorative and less like that's a paper clip. There we go, just makes it look a little bit pretty and finished. Now I've got some ribbons in matching colours that work with the piece of paper that forms the bulk of the main part of my design, and I'm going to tie these to make a tassel. I've put them through the loop at the bottom of my paper clip, and now I've got some just some thread that in a nice matching colour, and I'm going to twirl it first one way around the top of my collection of ribbons. Here I go, twirl, twirl, and then I'm going to twirl the other one in the opposite direction, twirl, twirl, and then I'm going to tie a knot in my thread to hold everything in place. I'm not tying a bow. I'm not very good at bows. A knot is absolutely sufficient. Now that my tassel is tied in place and ready to go, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim it down a little bit. I'm going to do that just before I glue everything in place. I like to have all the elements ready before I commit to gluing. So there we go, the tassel is in place. I've got a barking dog, I don't know if you can hear that in the background. I'm going to now glue everything into position. I'm going to add some glue to my that dog. I'm going to add some glue to my paper clip, and then some glue on the reverse on my craft foam. I'm going to add a tiny little bit of craft foam at the top, just to make that a little bit more secure. I really like that tassel effect, it's lovely. I've got one last sentiment to add, and I've just chosen one that colour matches with everything else from my puffy stickers, and that's the card complete. Card 9. This is a bit different and a bit fun. I've got a piece of waste paper from one of my earlier cards, and I want to use that at the bottom of my card to add a little bit of variety, and I'm going to secure that in place with some glue before I glue my top piece into position. Now with the top piece I'm only going to glue the bottom of this top piece. I want the top of that piece of paper not to stick to the grey card yet. I want it to be flapping free. And that's because I've die cut this. I've done this off camera, but I've used one of my rectangular dies to cut through both the sheet of paper and the grey card below. And this is a piece of acetate, but it's actually laminated. It's a plain laminated pouch. I wanted to show you that if you don't have acetate hanging around, but if you do have a laminating pouch, you can use that. Just run it through your laminator completely plain, and it will do the job for you. I've cut it down to size, and I'm going to glue on the grey card so that I can stick this into position, and then I'm going to add a little bit of glue. I was going to use this one, then I changed my mind, decided to use one that's got a detailed nozzle because I don't want too much glue splurging out. So this way I can control the flow a little bit better to glue on the inside of the top paper. So now that that's all glued in place, I'm going to take one of my puffy stickers that matches with the paper that I've used, which is books, and I'm also going to take one of the sentiments that says Top Stories, both from the puffy stickers, and that is my card complete. For my final card, now I decided to make a card that was quite complicated. You can make this a lot easier, but I wanted to use the masking paper in a different way, so I'm using repositionable glue onto a piece of white card and a piece of paper from the paper stock. I really loved this piece of paper, I thought it was gorgeous, and I'm going to use this to make a card on the orange side folding card stock from the kit. To make my masks, I'm going to take the large leaf, the small leaf and the largest flower, and I'm going to stamp them onto my masking paper using a grey Stays-On ink. The reason I'm using a Stays-On ink is because you don't have to wait for it to dry before you cut these out and risk having ink all over your fingers. Because it stays on, it's not going to come off on you as you cut around the shapes. And it also doesn't matter if it's not a brilliant impression, as long as you can see enough to cut around the shape, that's all you need. So now I'm using my stamping platform because I'm going to hold my card in place while I stamp on a little design. Now I'm stamping over the patterned paper and the plain white paper. There's a reason why I'm doing this, and there's also a reason why I used repositionable tape right at the beginning of making this card. So now I'm adding the mask to the flower, which I've just stamped into position. And I'm going to add a second leaf. I've already got one leaf stuck on my platform there. I'm sticking the other leaf, and I'm going to use one of my oxide inks to stamp that, to stamp both of those leaves. And then when they're stamped into position, I'm going to cover up and mask the second leaf, the little one on the right hand side, before I add in another of the flowers, and so on. When they're all inked up, I'm going to remove the masks. I'm going to save these masks again, and what I do is I put them onto their backing sheet and I put them in with the stamp set, so that way I know I've got everything together. And the repositionable tape comes into play here, because it means that I can take this off, because when you stamp over two different heights of paper you get a little line, and by using the repositionable tape so I can remove it, I can actually stick it all back in place and just move it about 1 millimeter, and that eliminates the line, so it looks like it's a complete stamp. There we go. And now, there's the dog again. Dog's come to see me to bark at me. And now I'm going to cut around the outside edge. The reason I stamped onto a white card is because I want a white line around my masked and stamped images. And the reason I want a white line is because when I put it onto the orange card, I want it to stand out a little bit. So I've added my sentiment onto my card using the orange ink, and I've gone around the outside edge of my card with just a tiny little bit of orange ink and one of my foam pads, and now I can glue everything down into position. And hopefully you can see why I wanted that white outside edge around my design. Once I add the little hearts and the little dots, my card will be complete. So I know I've rambled quite a lot on this video. I'm really sorry. We've had about 20 minutes of sunshine in the UK and I think I've got heat stroke. But I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all of the cards that we've made today. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, and I hope you can join me again soon. Take care.